Hi, everyone, and welcome to How I See, the Leica podcast. I'm your host, Louise Goldstone, and I'm really excited to be here today with Matt Stuart at the Leica headquarters in Wetzlar, Germany. Welcome, Matt. Thank you for being here. This is actually the first episode of the Leica podcast, so it's a huge honor to have you here.
I'm really honoured to be here, and thank you very much. A real privilege to be your first victim.
I hope not. So you've been photographing for over, I think, 25 years. Is that correct? Yeah. There's so much to cover when it comes to photography, but I'm really interested to discover where you started with photography, how you've made a career out of your craft along the way. So yeah, really excited to sit down and talk to you. What I find interesting from an outsider's perspective is your overall attitude to your craft and approach to interacting with the world around you. Is this how you've always been, and even before you started your career in photography?
Great question. I've always been an obsessive. And so my first obsession was BMX biking, where I would ride round and round the park all day on my bike, and enjoyed that immensely. Followed by skateboarding, which was a very big obsession of mine, which maybe we can talk about a little more later. And then, amongst other things, there was sort of a brief affair with martial arts, which didn't last very long. But I stumbled upon photography whilst working in a call centre. I had not a very good college or school career. I was busy skateboarding, and I ended up with the only job that I could get, which was answering customer complaints about mobile telephones, which was a bit of a sort of soul-destroying job. But somewhere along the line, my dad realised that I was probably not going to be the world's best call centre employee. And he bought me a couple of books from the Tate Britain. One was a photoposh book on Robert Frank, and one was an Henri Cartier-Bresson sort of compilation by Aperture. And he just bought them on a whim. I wasn't interested in photography. And he gave me these books as a present, and I would, flick through these whilst answering customer complaints. And I was just, bowled over by, these amazing moments, the history of these moments, especially Cartier-Bresson, Yeah. And I think that's where I sort of really got hooked. But yeah, I've always been an obsessive, and I've always been quite sort of hopeful.
Yeah.
And those two things, I think, are quite useful for a photographer.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that, did you have a certain creativity, from a young age, or perceptiveness that was part of you?
Well, I don't want to keep on running back to my dad, actually, but my dad was a graphic designer, and he would come home with his latest graphic design, and we would always be sort of exposed to creativity, and we were also sort of, when we were growing up, he sort of realized in particular that I was going to be creative or not, the next Einstein, and he encouraged creativity within the household, and I think that was really empowering and gave me a confidence that it was okay to be like this. Whereas in a lot of schools, you're encouraged to be academic, and being creative is, maybe not sort of something that we all aspire to. And so he enabled us to feel confident about being how we were.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, growing up, you of course grew up in the UK. Do you have any early memories of visual culture that stick out in your mind or had an impact on you? Obviously, you mentioned your dad's sort of graphic design work, but yeah, maybe some other visual.
Well, I vividly remember a poster we had in our house of Roy Lichtenstein Wham poster of the aeroplane that we would, I would look at the whole time. I just was like, wow, this is such a great cartoon. or peace, and what is it? Why is it here? Wham! And that was something that I would always look at. And we had some cushions in our very small flat that we used to live in of Egon Schiele, a sort of Egon Schiele. There was a head on one cushion, then the body on the next cushion, and so we were exposed to art pretty early on. But again, I mean, mainly it would be his, bringing back ideas and thoughts. He was always sort of very curious, full of facts, and he's still alive. He still is very curious and full of facts. He's not a graphic designer anymore. He's retired, but he's still a very creative man, and it's always really quite inspiring being around him. So I'm super lucky with my dad and my mum, who was always, very encouraging of us and very supportive of our sort of weirdness.
Yeah. In the best way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, in our sort of like previous conversations, you mentioned Back to the Future as having a sort of impact on you. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think in everyone's life there's a movie or a song or something that really hits you and changes the direction of your life. And in this case, in particular, Back to the Future came out, and it was like 1985, 1986. I was 12 years old, and I saw this amazing, young man in Michael J. Fox, in this amazing film. I mean, it really is a great film, a great trilogy. And but the thing that really stuck with me was how he, got away from Biff by holding onto the back of the car on the skateboard and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of got really interested in who did the stunt work for this movie, and I discovered it was a man called Per Welander, and he was in the Bones Brigade, which was a very famous sort of skateboarding crew set up by Stacy Peralta, and he was in the Bones Brigade. So I started looking at skateboarding videos, and then I was exposed to Tony Hawk, Tommy Guerrero, Lance Mountain, Mike McGill, Per Welander, Rodney Mullen, who were the very best skateboarders of the time. And so Back to the Future basically was the seed that led me on to skateboarding. And skateboarding became a very big part of me. And I became completely obsessed by skateboarding, as many, young people become. But the great thing about skateboarding is it's one of these things that you have to keep on repeating. Yeah. It's you try and try and try and try again until you make the trick. And what it taught me was a couple of things. Yeah, mainly that you have to practice in order to get anything, to do anything, to make anything, and you can't just jump on a board and do a 360 flip. Like, that doesn't happen. You need to hit your shins, 100 times before making the trick. And the other thing was that it taught me was that you had to kind of lose your fear. You had to throw yourself down a set of steps. And, what is the worst thing that can happen is, like, you can really hurt yourself, or you can break your neck, so deal with it. You're going to do it or not? And this was quite a good lesson to have learned at an early age, because with the photography, everyone's fear is, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if they shout at me? But, what if they shout at me is nothing in comparison to what if I break my neck going down this flight of stairs. And so I didn't ever feel that concerned about photographing in a public place.
I was going to ask you, these early influences, were these things that kind of followed you into your adult life in some way and blended into your career as a photographer? And I guess having that, repetition and fearlessness, I guess, through skateboarding is something you can tap into when out on the street.
Absolutely. I would definitely put it in my pocket. And funnily enough, I often think about the call center. I had 100 people shouting at me every day, and I learned how to be nice to them and send them away with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
That was really handy as well. Put that in your pocket as a street photographer, because you're going to get shouted at and you have to know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then actually, funnily enough, even the martial arts, never to use martial arts in an aggressive way, but just to learn how to move.
Yeah.
That was very useful. So there's a lot of things that I sort of picked up along the way that were really useful to sort of helped me in my sort of end product, which was being a street photographer.
Yeah. Just before we move on from Back to the Future, I wanted to ask you, is there a moment in time that you would love to travel back to and photograph, or, you know, in any moment of time?
Oh, that's a great question. I would definitely love to, you know, give 1964 a go. I mean, that was, to me, one of my biggest photographic inspirations is Gary Winogrand.
Yeah.
And in 1964, he went on a road trip. He had a Guggenheim grant. And in about 6 months, he got more good pictures than anyone has ever got in such a short space of time. And I often think, wow, how did he do that? But half of me does know that 1964 looked really great.
Yeah.
And, you know, historically it was very interesting. And I think going back in time to around then would be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you've talked about working in customer complaints department and receiving those two sort of photo books from two sort of the greats. Did you have any idea that, you know, photography could be a job, you know, earning money, and how did that process kind of start from you, from that book, those books?
Yeah. So I think...
asking you to look back.
Yeah, looking back, you know, my dad knew photographers.
Okay.
And so what happened is I sort of came home, you know, and said, listen, I think I want to be a photographer. And he's like, well, that's great, you know, go for it. You can go and be a photographer. But I was like, no, I want to get paid, you know, I want it to be my job. And he said, oh, that's kind of a different ball game. You know, that's quite difficult. You know, you have to really go for it if you want to, you know, do that. I mean, it's fine being a hobbyist or, you know, a serious amateur photographer or whatever. But if you want to make money doing it, that's quite tough. And so thankfully through him, I met a photographer called Marcus Lyon, who was a busy working commercial photographer, but also a sort of art photographer. He had lots of strings to his bow, and I became his third assistant, which was a very highfalutin title. But I gradually worked my way up to being his first assistant. He worked every day of the week. So I went from cleaning the toilet, making the sandwiches, delivering the jobs. Delivering the jobs was great because it meant that I could actually leave the studio with my camera and go and photograph on my way to delivering the job. Yeah. So I would find myself, you know, on the tube, you know, underground, and I did a little project on the underground, and you know, found a handful of, you know, weird and wonderful pictures. It gave me the freedom to photograph every day, even though I was still getting paid, and I was still being exposed to photography and, you know, how to write an invoice and how to set up a still life, you know, set, and how to take a portrait, and how to, you know, photograph street children in Mexico. So I had this really amazing learning from this man who was also very generous. He was you know, kind, and you know, I made every mistake in the photographic book, and he would always he would never kind of throw me under the bus. He would always say we made a mistake. So I learned a lot about being sort of inclusive and being
working
kind.
in a team,
working in a team.
I was going to say, you know, what did working as an assistant kind of teach you about the world of photography? But it sounds like that was your sort of education into photography.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, more than, for me anyway, more than college, where you kind of, you make a mistake and you go, oh, I made a mistake, you know, let's do it again. If you make a mistake on a job, it's a mistake and you have to be accountable for it. So I learned so many things. I mean, I really did make every mistake in the book. And you learn from those. And actually, you know, failure, something we were talking about yesterday, you know, failure is very important, especially in photography. I was speaking to someone just the other day, and I think I've probably got about, you know, 1 second's worth of success in photography, you know. Maybe 500 maximum good pictures, or whatever, and I don't know, and I think it's very important to embrace failure as a photographer and be open to it.
Absolutely. I think often photographers are asked who and what inspires them. And you seem to draw inspiration from across the kind of multiverse of photography. So, whether that's other photographers, writers, critics, creatives, was this your kind of mentorship into the world of photography? Talking about the sort of, I guess, education from Marcus Lyon. What was that kind of, was that a sort of jumping off point and then learning more about the world of photography with these different resources, I guess?
I think, let me think. I think really I learned from Marcus, but also, from my dad and people that he had some great assistants that I worked with, in particular, a guy called Andy Wilson, who, went on to become a very successful commercial photographer, and he flew planes. And I would, come in every Monday and listen to his stories about flying planes, listen to his story about the plane that had an engine failure and at the weekend, and he had to, have a crash landing and but all of these things, but also a lot of these people were very positive. They had a very positive attitude. And moving forward, the photographers that I met who I really liked, people like Joel Meyerowitz, they are very positive spirits. And with that, I think that kind of rubbed off on me, and I've become reasonably positive and hopeful in how I go out in the world, whether it's photography or, buying something at the supermarket. I'm always having a chat with the, the lady on the till. I definitely learned a way of being as a photographer. You can't turn up as a photographer, for instance, to do a portrait and find that you're this kind of, nervous sort of introvert or whatever. You do have to be like, hello, really nice to meet you. Let's do this. You look great. Let's go. And I learned a lot of that kind of stuff from them.
Yeah. So interesting. I think that like transitioning into the environment of street photography, I think you kind of touched on it before, but was this an area that you were kind of exploring in a personal, professional way whilst working as an assistant? You kind of mentioned that, and I thought that's kind of interesting because that was sort of the starting point. Whilst working as an assistant, you were then going in between jobs or locations or whatever it was and sort of snapping away what you were seeing around you. I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, great question. I think I was it was sort of almost muscle memory from skateboarding. You go out into a public place and you look for something to skateboard on. Yeah. And with the street photography, you go out into a public place and you look for a place to do street photography on. And, I would try and find a good place to stand or a good place to wait. With the skateboarding, you would find a good place to, throw yourself down a flight of stairs. And so was almost what I knew and felt comfortable with already, because I had experienced it for such a long time and been obsessed by it. Had gone out and tried. And it was what I was used to and what my brain was tuned into doing.
Yeah, you mentioned a London Underground series at that time. I'm just interested, do you still have those photographs, and kind of, is it something you often think about, or is it, sort of now looking back just ages ago and not so relevant? It's just interesting to sort of think back a bit. Yeah,
the London Underground series was, I remember I shot them in black and white film on a Leica. I bought a secondhand, my very first camera was a secondhand Leica.
Yeah.
I remember knocking on some guy's door and, giving him cash and him giving me this camera and me, heading off. And I remember being very focused at the time, and I was very much into, Cartier-Bresson and not cropping. I still don't crop, but, I was really obsessed by not cropping, having a key line, the black line around the picture. And the underground work was all, uncropped and very, very sort of focused. And so I do actually look back on it and think, wow, you were really, really like in the zone when you were doing that. And it really mattered. I mean, it still matters now, but I was crazy. And, I remember, the exposure on the London Underground at the time was, 60th at 2.8 with 800 ISO film, push my 400 Tri-X one stop. And that was the exposure. So I always knew the exposure on the London Underground. So it was kind of easy. All you had to do was focus. But the one of the slightly more scary things about the London Underground is if you get caught taking a picture of someone and they're not happy with it, you can't go anywhere for a whole stop. Yeah. You're like, oh, okay, we're just going to sit here really awkwardly. But no, it was a really good experience. And I managed to find, I found all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I found a naked man walking through the London Underground, and a man sat next to an alien, and all sorts of strange things that you could never really dream up. And they came about just by, trying again.
Yeah. So interesting. I think that one thing that we kind of spoke about before the podcast was sort of about, picking a photograph and sort of talking about it. And it's a segment that we're calling Unframed. And you shared 2 photographs actually, which I thought we could just look at a little bit. And I'll sort of describe them for anyone listening. So they're both street photographs, of course. And the first one is a sort of shop front, but there's quite a few different details going on here. We have, and I might even miss some in this moment, but we have someone who's sort of dressing the shop front, changing the mannequins. We have a headless body, which is obviously some sort of attraction, and they're wearing a suit holding a umbrella and someone posing next to them. And then we have this sort of snapshot of a sort of outline of a man in the light, which is sort of coming through onto the shop front. Could you tell us a little bit more, or you tell me a little bit more about this photograph?
Yeah, sure. So the reason I chose this particular picture is because this is one of those photographs where it rewarded me with something that I hadn't seen. And a lot of time with photography, you think you know what you're getting, or at least you hope you know what you're getting, and you get what you get. And you saw what you saw, and then you look at the photograph, and it's proof that you saw what you saw. And, that's very rewarding. And, we've recorded the event exactly as we wanted to, and we're, pleased. But with this particular picture, I saw the man who was being led somewhere, and this strange headless man with an umbrella. And in my head, I thought, oh, it's some sort of, guy advertising something or whatever it is. Should I follow him? Should I try and take some pictures? And you often have that conversation with yourself as a photographer, should I? Can I be bothered? And I thought, oh, come on, be bothered. So I followed this person walking down Oxford Street, and I took maybe 3 or 4 frames, and as they were moving along, which is difficult as a photographer. So if you're actually tracking along with someone, the background moves. And you have no control over the background. Yeah. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Whereas if you find a background and stay there and let people walk towards you, you have control over the background because the background isn't moving. So this type of picture for me is a little bit more difficult to get. Yeah. So I'm following this strange scene, and as I'm taking pictures, I see a lady in the shop window dressing some mannequins. And obviously the mannequins have got these, heads, and they're a body, and there's a slight connection between the man with the umbrella, the headless man with the umbrella. And I took 3 or 4 frames, and then I thought, I'll let it go. Anyway, put the film in. At the end of the day, I would shoot quite a lot of film, really due to my sort of personality. I'm sort of slightly hyper, and I would, go out and shoot probably a little bit too much, thinking that everything was great, only to find out that most of it was rubbish. But I got the film back, and I put this is film, so I put it on the light box, and I looked through the loop, the magnifying glass, and I saw that there was this head that had been sort of highlighted, or this shadow in the light. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that. I absolutely didn't see that. And that makes the picture. I mean, then there's 3 things that sort of correlate. There's this black head in the sunshine. There's these black heads on the mannequins, and there's this headless thing walking along. And a 3 is a difficult juggle 2 is kind of easy.
Yeah.
Not easy, but you can go like, dirt. But doing the three juggle is a little bit more tricky. And so this is one of those pictures that engages and rewards. This is something that my dad used to talk about as well. Engage and reward. It's where you look at something and you look at it for a minute or so, and you're like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on here? Oh. And then you get it.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those pictures that engages and rewards.
Absolutely.
And I like that about it. And it's also kind of loose. It's not like perfectly composed or anything.
Yeah, I think that's what's really like interesting about it. You look at it, your eye sort of leads through, and then you spot this silhouetted sort of figure in this sort of square of light. And yeah, it's just that sort of snapshot moment that actually is pretty amazing. You shared another image, which is sort of the sort of quintessential Oxford Circus. So anyone that's sort of grown up or been at, or even just visited Oxford Circus, you kind of feel the rush of that moment. And, there's a bus going past, there's people in the foreground, all the way through to the background. Everyone's doing something different. And it's kind of that interaction of people who are not related to each other at all, and how that kind of comes across in an image. So yeah, you can kind of see Top Man in the background as well, which doesn't exist
Rest
anymore.
in peace.
Rest in peace, yeah. So now in IKEA, I think. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about this image.
Okay, so this picture is quite a complicated one, and it's a picture that I had tried to take for a really long time, and it was a picture that I wanted to take from that position because the light hits that spot, which I think is literally one of the best places to do street photography in the world, by the way. But it's extremely difficult because it's such a mess of people. Now, this picture, there's a lot of things that are correlating. Most of them I didn't see, but I was, pleased to see them at the end. One thing is there's 7 index fingers. And if you look through it, you'll see there's 7 index fingers going on.
I can see that now. Yeah.
I think I saw 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then there's I call sort of, there's 4 that were sort of, oh, that's a bonus. Oh, that's a bonus. The light on them is really good. And also the color is really good. If you look, there's no sort of greens or yellows or fluorescents that are popping out. It's a sort of a red, a purple and a brown. Mainly throughout the shot, which was quite pleasing. And then on the bus it says, "Is our small print," I think. Does it say "Is our small print"? Yeah, it says "Is our small print," which has a nice connection to, like, just look at the sort of the small fine details on this one. And so I like it for that. And everyone is in their right space. And yeah, it kind of came together. So it's a sort of, for me, it's kind of a photographer's photograph in that it's a big mess and it just about hangs together. And there's a few things that connect it throughout. Again, another sort of engage and reward type of photograph.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of, bringing order to a sort of messiness is like an idea of, within photography. And I think that, creating a static image out of a sort of chaotic scene, especially in a place like London, and especially in this location in London, is of course something that you've been doing for, I think you said you've been photographing there for 20 years or 20 plus years. So still going back, do you still go back to that moment when you are in London and go to Oxford Circus and take photographs?
I do. Yeah. I run some workshops. I've been running workshops with Leica UK. Occasionally I do them on my own.
At the Academy in the UK.
At the Academy.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I do is take them out onto Oxford Street. And that scene in Amelie where she takes the blind man around?
Yeah.
And she says, smell this, look at him, he's doing this. And I kind of do that with them, and I sort of, rush around and say, look at that, look at this, look at the light, look at, look at how they're moving, look at that shop front. And it's one of my favourite places to go, even now, even though I have, well and truly sort of done Oxford Street. It's always a rush to go back there because it's so, busy.
And vibrant.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think we were sort of talking about exploring before this sort of Unframed segment and sort of picking apart a photograph and sort of looking behind the scenes of it, sort of talking about exploring street photography in a personal, professional way whilst working as a photo assistant. In terms of pursuing street photography to make a living, where was your starting point, or sort of like your first paid gig as a street photographer?
Well, what I did initially, so I was working with Marcus, and he used to make postcards. This is pre sort of internet. And I thought, I should make some postcards. And so I made some black and white postcards of the pictures I'd been taking. One of them was of a man looking at the Millennium Wheel, and he had a wheel attached to his back, which was one of my, good pictures at the time. One was a picture on the tube, one was a picture in a museum, and one was a picture of a dog at a dog show, a black and white dog on a carpet at a dog show. And they were 4 pretty good pictures. Even to this day, I'm like, yeah, I'm really proud of those. And I made 1,000 postcards of each. And I did this kind of massive send out to everyone. I bought, I think it was called File FX at the time. It was like a directory of all of the creative companies and magazines in London. And you pay, I don't know, 100 quid for it. And you get all of the addresses and all of the creatives' names. And you just do a mail out. And I sent out all these postcards, and I got about, 4 phone calls saying, thank you, we'd love to see your portfolio. That was great. And I got one job. But the one job was actually a big annual report for a company called British Land, which is a big building company. I think it still exists. I'm pretty sure it still exists. It's made lots of buildings throughout London.
Shout out to them.
Shout out to British Land. Yeah, some of the buildings lovely, some of them not so lovely. So, but anyway, the annual report was to photograph in the Museum of London for a month. And it meant I could go out with the, all of the people who were doing the digging, excavating, the people who were looking for Roman remains, the archaeologists. Yeah. And I'd be in the labs. I would be in the museum. All of these things that were really interesting to me, and so I spent every day doing that job, and it was actually for quite a lot of money. It was 10 grand.
Yeah,
a long time ago. So it's a big job. Anyway, the enthusiast that I am, I think I spent about 10 grand on film. And I didn't really make a penny from it. But what did happen is I then had this beautiful annual report. It came with a fake gold coin embedded in it. It was really like a piece of art, this annual report. They obviously had a lot of money. Yeah. So then I had proof that I could actually do a job, and I would show that when I went and showed my portfolio, and I can do this, and it does work. Going out and not setting things up, not staging things, like bringing things back from real life is interesting and human and feels honest and truthful, and companies obviously like that kind of feeling. Even if they're not necessarily that type of a company. And so I was commissioned more and more to do that type of work. I would also do anything, quite frankly. And I think that's the key to, just getting by in photography is you need to be a sort of a jack of all trades. Could I take a portrait? Yes, because I'd been working with Marcus. We did Goldman Sachs portraits for 5 years. I can set up a portrait.
Yeah.
Can you go and be a fly on the wall in a hospital? Yeah, I can be a fly on the wall in a hospital, no problem. The only thing I could never do was a still life, and I tried to give.
That's next.
No, I don't know. I just don't have the patience. I'm too sort of manic for that. And I also try to avoid group portraits as much as I can. They're on my the lowest part of my getting by list. But and you, as a photographer, you learn to sort of wheel and deal and duck and dive and do a bit of everything. But the street photography was the passion, was the absolute sort of obsession that never stopped and has never stopped. And I think through that, I have been commissioned to do advertising, which looks like street photography, which isn't street photography, but looks like it.
Yeah.
And lots of other things, quite frankly. Actually, more and more now, I'm actually being asked to be filmed as a photographer.
Yeah.
As a sort of, almost as a, I don't know, I don't want to say the word influencer, but being someone who is using something and being filmed using it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you duck and dive and you sort of you work with how it's going.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, how do you work differently as a commercial photographer? You know, so you said that sort of, you know, it's not really street photography, you know, in terms of like advertising. Of course, it's possibly, you know, giving that feeling depending on what you're doing. But yeah, just interested to know how you work differently in that commercial environment. It could be like equipment or you know, approach.
I always remember I wouldn't use my Leicas for commercial work. And that wasn't because the Leicas weren't good enough in any way. It was actually because I wanted them to stay pure and part of my sort of, you know, inverted commas, artistic practice.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use those to do commercial work. And so I just the commercial work was always felt a little bit downgraded to this obsession and this thing that I absolutely you know, really cared about. But also with the commercial work, I know it sounds funny, but if you've got, you know, a model and you've got sort of lights, cameras and action and people, and you've got a location, it's really easy because street photography is really hard and you have to do it in the moment.
Yeah.
And did you get it or did you not?
Yeah.
Whereas with the commercial work, it's like, well, let's do it again. And so the commercial work for me was really straightforward.
Yeah, I think that, you know, aside from the sort of professional side of, you know, your career, Magnum, of course, became a big part of your life in 2016 when you became a nominee member. How did this process come about?
So in 2016, I published my book, All That Life Can Afford, which was a compilation of pictures from London. And it comes from the famous quote, tired of London, tired of life, because there is in London all that life can afford, which was by Samuel Johnson. And this book was really well received. It sold out pretty much immediately. And I got a couple of orders, one from a guy called Mark Power, who's a well-known Magnum photographer, and another order from a guy called Martin Parr, who you may or may not have heard of. And so I sent them a book and they got the book. And then I got an email from Mark saying, have you ever thought about applying to Magnum? And I hadn't ever thought about applying to Magnum, and it wasn't something that was really on my radar. But I said, well, no, I haven't, but, you know, do you think I should? And he said, well, I think you should. And I said, well, does Martin Parr think I should? Because, you know, I just need to know about these, you know, the sort of king of British photography, whether he is likely to vote for me or not. And he said, no, Martin, 100% vote for you. Like, he's got your back. So I thought, okay, what the hell? You know, I do not expect to get in. So I put in a submission of my work, and Mark, you know, is such a sweet man. He told me about exactly what happened. He said, they initially everyone was voting. You got all the votes. It was like they were coming in. And I was like, everyone was voting for you. And then halfway through, it turned. And then no, all of them were not voting for you, not voting for you, not voting for you. And you basically scraped through with 51% out of, you know, you had to get over 50. And you've got in as a nominee, and I was driving the car and it literally almost crashed. I mean, it would have been the shortest lived nominee of all time.
5 seconds.
Yeah, and so anyway, then began this kind of crazy couple of years, and I was warned quite early on that basically the people that hadn't voted for me were highly unlikely to change their minds. And what you need to do in Magnum to get to become an associate is hit 65%. So I had this sort of like, all right, like let's have a fun couple of years.
Yeah, because I was going to say being like awarded a nominee member is in itself a huge accolade. And sort of, was there ever an aim to continue at Magnum? But obviously that's quite a lot of pressure to push forward. So I would understand that, you know, maybe, you know, being an associate member would be a sort of a tough gig to get to that point.
I remember by the time I was being voted on and voted out, I had said to my mum and dad, you know, I really don't like this. You know, this is way too much. You know, half the people here aren't particularly friendly. You know, I'm not, some of them don't actually talk to me. And, you know, it feels very competitive and you know, quite political. And so I'm not really enjoying it. I mean, I'm enjoying doing the photography because I love it. And, you know, I've got to kind of rocket up my bum because I'm having to do stuff and, you know, really go for it. And I was really going for it. You know, I was traveling around the world doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things for the staff at Magnum. Mm-hmm. What happens is you sort of get in and the staff have a new person to sing and dance about. And they really push that new person and, you know, try and get them jobs and introduce them to the, you know, clients, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think maybe one of the reasons Magnum doesn't quite work is because the members who have been in it for a long time, then they don't get that sort of enthusiasm from the staff that are working for them. And so they get a little bit bitter and twisted about the new people coming in. Got you. And so the people that are voting for you at the end of the day are the people that are pissed off with you because you're taking their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So some of that kind of stuff happened. But all in all, I had a really great time. You know, I met all of my heroes. You know, had Joseph Goodell. No, Cartier-Bresson was dead.
Yeah, at that point. But
Kudelka, I remember sort of being given a big hug by Kudelka and thinking, wow, like, you know, remember that. Yeah. And, you know, meeting Elliot Erwitt, went to Elliot Erwitt's studio and asked Elliot Erwitt. I've got a great Elliot Erwitt story if you want. I went to a wedding, Stuart Smith's wedding, who designed my book, and Elliot Erwitt was at the wedding because Stuart did all of Elliot's books, and I like asking kind of stupid questions. And I said, "Oh, Elliot, if you could go to dinner with 3 people that you've photographed, who would they be, and what would you eat?" And he looked at me like with a sort of twinkle in his eye, and he's like, "What a good question. Well, definitely JFK. Charming, handsome, full of stories, you know, really amazing man." And then he thought a bit longer. He's like, "Oh, Muhammad Ali, definitely Muhammad Ali." And, you know, charismatic, funny, you know, center of attention, you know, great man. And he said, oh, I should probably get a woman to come along as well, shouldn't I? And I was like, yes. He's like, "Oh, Monroe, yeah." I was like, you know, he said, you know, amazing, you know, vivacious and funny. And so I'm thinking, oh my God, they got JFK and Marilyn Monroe sitting around the dinner table with Muhammad Ali. And I said, "Oh, well, you know, what would you eat? You know, what would you eat?" Oh, he said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, 100 grams of Beluga caviar each and a good champagne, probably Dom Perignon. And that
sounds
was
like
that.
Quite a good night.
Well, I only recently looked up, like, what does 100 grams of Beluga caviar cost? It's like about $1,000, you know.
Stop.
So they would have had a wonderful night.
They would have had great time.
Yeah.
Great time.
Anyway, so
I
met all of these really amazing people, you know, and some not so amazing. Like I say, like in a big group like that, you're going to meet really, really wonderful people, and then you're going to be really sort of slightly, you know, upset by the people that you thought were great, but they weren't such nice people. And suddenly you look at their pictures and you're like, oh, yeah, but not such a nice guy, not such a nice girl. Not so keen on their photography anymore. Yeah. And I think that's important. I think you have to be, you know, as a photographer, you have to be, I think you have, in order for your pictures to really translate and really to be, you know, part of you, you can't, you know, take wonderful, you know, sunny, you know, pictures of your family and be, you know, not such a nice person. You need to be real. And yeah, it was slightly disappointing in some respects, but mainly, you know, a great bunch of people, talented, and, you know, every single one of them, you know, really fighting for what they think. And that was really inspiring. Yeah.
Like scrolling back slightly, I'd love to ask you a little bit about, you know, street photo collectives you've been a part of and how they've been important to your career and life. I think actually quite a few years before you became a nominee member, you were part of street photo collectives, and that sort of continued for you.
Yeah, so initially I became a member of In Public, which was set up in 2000 by a guy called Nick Turpin. And he sort of found a friend called David Gibson, and then, you know, and then I turned up, and I was pretty enthusiastic, and I went sort of off around the world trying to press gang people to become members, and that was really great. It lasted for almost 20 years, and we had exhibitions, made books, made magazines, got together, have beers and things like that. We all eventually fell out, or at least we fell out with a couple of people, and it sort of imploded. And then after that, we set up a collective called Up, and again, which was sort of meant as a sort of positive, we're doing this because we're, think Up is a very positive word. Yeah. And many of the people from In Public stayed on in that group, and we're all, friends now, and we still, inspire each other and send each other pictures. Yeah. We're not particularly active anymore. But it's quite nice to know that if I go to Crete, that I can stay on my, friend Sharon Posse's sofa. Yeah. And if I go to New York, Gus Powell is always going to open his door to me, and stuff like that. And, I was in Thailand just last year, and my friend Tavapong, met up and we went out for dinner. Yeah. So it's quite nice to have that kind of security blanket of friends around the world.
I was going to say, because being involved in, photography is often described, especially now, as being part of a community. So I just wanted to know how important it was to kind of narrow that down slightly within this genre of, of photography into street photography, having a sort of collective. Does it make it more manageable to sort of connect with your peers, especially before the existence of social media? Was that a kind of sort of nice, community, I guess, to have?
Well, I mean, what's really great about street photography is that you bump into people out on the street. Yeah. And it's very sort of affirming to know that there are another bunch of nutcases out there doing exactly the same thing most of the time. Yeah. And I remember, I've done it now for such a long time. I do know the people who are doing it regularly because I bump into them a lot. And, it would go from, bumping into David Gibson, who's, 65-year-old man, to bumping into Curtis Peacock, who was a 14-year-old boy. And I know that Curtis would be out every day with his Leica taking pictures. Yeah. And I would always, say hi and how you doing, and give him some support and enthusiasm. And you do need that sort of network of like-minded crazies to be out there. And then, but with the sort of social media thing, it has actually become kind of even better in a way, because I know that Sam Ferris in Australia has been out all day taking photographs like a crazy man, and is posting his pictures, and he's really good, and he's doing it, and you have this kind of it's a security blanket of knowing that you're not the only one.
Not alone.
And it's inspiring. It's really inspiring. But there's nothing quite as good as bumping into Niall McDermott or someone in London and going for a beer, and just talking through how their life is going, and just knowing that there are other people out there doing it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think hindsight is often described as a true learning lesson, and this is something you kind of touched on earlier, and we spoke about yesterday as well. As you look back at your career, those moments where you maybe weren't succeeding or felt like you were failing, do you see these moments as equally important as the moments where you've achieved success? I know you said success is that 1 second, but how important are these moments of failure or not successful moments?
Well, that's a really good question. I think with photography, you particularly learn about failure. Why did I fail on this picture when I should have succeeded? Oh, I failed because I was shaking, because my adrenaline was going through the roof. And you learn from that, and next time you think, okay, don't shake, stay calm, and walk forward, don't walk back. Most people who aren't photographers, if something is happening, they either freeze and stay still, or they walk back. They think, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm out of here. And with photography, you learn to walk forward, and you learn to stay calm in the moment. And you also have all of these, the little voice in your head going, should I take a picture now? Is this okay? Are you being okay? Are you weird? Is this okay? Are they okay? Are they okay with you? Is the world all right? You have all these multiple questions in the moment very quickly. And I think I don't know. I think I might be segueing a bit.
Don't worry, it's all good.
But having these questions and asking yourself these questions in life all the time, in the moment, is extremely healthy for you. Forget photography. Like, I'm just talking about being, good, responsible person when things happen. And we were talking about this last night. I mean, one of the things that I've realized more and more is that because I'm out on the street quite a lot, I see a lot of accidents, or I see things happening to people. And I respond in a calm and sort of calculated way in the moment when these things happen. And so, I go and help. And so I, calmly walk up, and I know how to, put someone in the recovery position. I know how to, 9 times out of 10, someone's fainted. I know how to, lift someone's legs up in the air so that the blood rushes back to their head. And I feel quite proud of what photography has taught me to do in those kind of moments. So I've learned from photography to be calm and to be, cool and to walk forward.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I've learned how to respond well in medical situations and medical emergencies. So it teaches you a lot about life.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because you're kind of finding your way through experience and constantly sort of pushing that boundary, and then you sort of add all these things along the way. So, if you're struggling at the beginning, you rectify, the mistake and then move on. And then the next time it's different, and maybe a different mistake. And that's kind of, I guess, how you learn.
I think it's also it's this kind of fine tuning. But something else I have also learned with photography is always try.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't try, those are the ones that haunt you. So with photography, give it a go, and then look at it and go, oh, that was rubbish. And like, have it confirmed, like it was rubbish, or it was great, or whatever. But if you don't try, it's like the fish that got away. You say, I saw this great fish, and by next week it was a dolphin, and by next week it was a killer whale, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger in your head. So always give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't do the sort of don't become the analysis paralysis photographer who's busy thinking about whether they should or shouldn't. Do it, and then look at it and think about whether you're going to show it to anyone afterwards. But don't not have it.
Darren Brown wrote the foreword to your book, Think Like a Street Photographer. And he says that tenacity is your trick, and an ability to be tenacious is what you seek to inspire. I think a reference to your determination to get outside and shoot. Do you think repetition is important to make good work?
I do, 100%. I think, I keep on quoting this Gary Player quote, it's funny, the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
But if you keep on doing it, muscle memory, what it feels like to, press a button and bring the film forward, press a button, bring the film forward, or whether you're shooting digital, keep your finger, boom, 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 boom. Don't just think you've got it in one. You haven't. Like, you never get it in one. It's highly unlikely. I've got one picture in one.
Yeah.
You have to keep on going. And then when you think you've got it, you probably haven't. So keep on going. And if you miss it, don't suddenly throw the camera down and say, oh, I missed it, damn it, because it's going to happen right again.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to pick the camera back up and put it back up to your eye. So always have that kind of positivity. And Joel Meyerowitz talks about it. It's just the art of saying yes. Like, yes, 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 yes. But never like, no, 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 no. Because as soon as you're giving your brain no's, it's going like, oh, well, no, forget it. Let's keep on. Let's go and have a coffee. So the way you approach photography, I think, is very important, and I approach it from a positive and hopeful perspective. And in doing that, you encourage yourself to think it's going to get better and better and better and better, even though 9 times out of 10 it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of taking photographs for a living, I guess, is the process behind the shot is rarely seen by the viewer, and sort of often described as a lucky moment. Pulling back the veil slightly, do you see these as lucky moments? Or I guess I know the answer to this, but do you think getting outside, knowing your environment and experience helps you to frame those moments?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's a lot of luck involved, but 9 times out of 10, I'm standing in a place where I know the light is good potentially, or the background is good, where there's a lot of people. Don't stand somewhere where there's no people. You can find yourself as a photographer in this kind of hole of like waiting, and you've got the perfect background and perfect everything, but then no one turns up, and you find that you've got rigor mortis, because you've been waiting there for so long. So no, I find a spot to wait. I also, when I get to a new place, I sort of do a massive recce of everything. I walk everywhere. I wear myself out, 30,000 steps in a day, just looking for good locations, good light. I use an app on my phone called Sunseeker to know where the good light will be at certain times of day.
I love this.
So I go back and I'll wait where the good light is at a certain type of day, and I'll have it in my head. And, I would have taken a snapshot picture of it to check exactly where it was, so I can go back to it and find it again. And then you wait there like a fisherman, and I liken it to fishing. Fishing in particular is where you find a good spot and you just wait. And then as the people come to you, like in that picture that we were speaking about on Oxford Street with all of the, the multiple gestures, you just hope for something like that to happen. But then, actually, in my book, I call it fish, follow, and then the third one is fuck, which you might have to beep out. But the fishing is where you stand still. Following is where you follow, like the other picture that I showed you, which is a little bit more difficult. And then the F moment that sounds like duck. Those are the ones where you just have to have your camera ready. You have to be good to go, and it's happening in front of you, and it's totally unexpected, and there's no waiting or following that would change it. It's just happening. And if you're scrolling through social media right now, you've missed it. So you need to be 100% present and in the moment. And 9 times out of 10, those particular pictures are the best ones because they catch you unawares.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking or talking about luck more generally, when it comes to your career, do you believe in luck, the sort of right place, right time kind of thing?
I you know what, I think I have been really, really into photography, and so I went to openings, I went to book signings, I wanted to meet all my heroes. I met all my heroes. Ask me about my Mark Ribot story, ask me about my Martin Parr story, ask me about all of these different photographers. I've been to their talks, I turned up to their book signings, I was there. And in doing that, you expose yourself to other people who are in the industry, who are interested in it. I went to I've been to one workshop in my life at Duxpool, which was with Leonard Freed, who was a fantastic Magnum photographer. And someone else who was on that workshop was Tim Hetherington, who was a famous war photographer who sadly passed away. But I became very good friends with him, and we were keen, really keen. And so, you have to be lucky, but along the way, you have to expose yourself to the idea of getting lucky. And in being there, more likely to bump into a book publisher, or more likely to bump into another, sort of sick, enthusiastic street photographer, by being at these events, or by being at shows, or by being there. Even at demonstrations, I would go out to demonstrations just to practice. Demonstrations in particular are really good learning ground, because 9 times out of 10, the people who are there do want to be photographed. I mean, in occasions they don't, but having people not performing for you, but being there and doing their thing and being able to photograph them and frame them in a successful way is really good training for when you don't have any control, which is really, you have a bit of control in that you have a rectangle and a button, but the street photography is far more difficult because you're trying to capture something out of nothing.
Yeah, I think I briefly asked you about this yesterday, but actually I wanted to kind of ask you in the moment and get your sort of input. I know it's very much your day-to-day, but as an outsider looking in, I find it really interesting to know, when did you feel at a point where you could take photographs of people outside as a stranger without fear or inhibition?
I think it took a while. 4 or 5 years of doing it every day. And now I do it without even thinking about it. And in doing it without even thinking about it, people don't even think about it. So I can't remember the last time I've had an altercation or any problems taking pictures of people on the street.
Yeah, it's crazy to kind of see you, watching you out, as a street photographer. And I'll ask you a little bit about that in a second. But are there any moments that you've had that you still think about and consider like that was a close call, or do you kind of spot these moments and avoid them?
I generally spot them and avoid them, especially nowadays. I mean, for instance, I would never photograph a fight. There's no point in photographing a fight. It generally looks like a fight. And you also expose yourself to the potential being drawn into the fight. And I'm just like, I can't be bothered with that. I've seen, if I want to watch a fight, I'll put the boxing on.
Yeah.
I have, accidentally in my time photographed drug deals on Oxford Street under bus shelters, which is generally where they happen, because cameras, are generally, well, at the time they weren't on the bus shelter. Yeah. They can hide underneath them, and and finding that you've got a sort of slightly angry drug dealer saying, what are you photographing? And you're like, I'm not, and I'd just explain I wasn't photographing them, and I learned how to explain honestly that I wasn't. But those kind of things can be tricky, but hasn't happened to me for a long time, and I can spot it a mile off. I was going to
say that sort of street awareness just sort of is a training in itself.
Yeah, I went to Barcelona recently, actually for Jaume and Leica, and a friend of mine said, be careful in Barcelona, a lot of pickpockets and things in Barcelona. And I was like, she didn't know I was a street photographer, and I was like, yeah, I'll be all right. I'll be okay. And you're very aware of everything, especially on the street. I generally pick a subject to photograph out from about 30 meters. So you start looking from quite far off. Whereas, most people in a public place are looking at their phone, talking to their friend, or thinking about the next shop they're going to. They're not actually looking at people. And so as a street photographer, you really scan and are very much aware of your surroundings and what's happening. More recently, I have been photographing in Los Angeles, and I had a new project called Sunrise on Sunset, and that involved waking up at sunrise and walking on Sunset Boulevard and seeing who was there. And LA has got ridiculously good light. That's why the movie industry is there. And morning light, as far as I'm concerned, is the best light. And so waking up, driving to Sunset Boulevard and walking on Sunset Boulevard with the sun coming up is almost a sort of spiritual experience. However, the people that are generally awake at that time in the morning are, people who are, maybe without homes, maybe they're, drug addicts, maybe they're coming back from the night before. It's a little bit of a rough terrain. And in doing that, I would always phone my friend. I have a friend in LA, Bum Dog. His name is Bum Dog, and he would come out with me, and we would shoot together. In only just to have two people, one person literally having your back, because if someone comes up behind you and decides they want to steal your camera, they're generally sort of bang you on the back of the head. Yeah. So only in situations like that do I sort of ever really worry. But I know I generally. I'm pretty up on what's going on.
Yeah, I was going, just from going back to what I mentioned before, I think that watching you out on the street photographing, and you sort of mentioned about maybe blending into the background a little bit, but that really does exist with you. You can kind of see people just do not notice you in a way, which is sort of bizarre, but it works. Or relatively unnoticed, let's say. Do you find that the Leica M allows you to do this?
Definitely. And it's small. I've only used the Leica since realistically day one. But it's very small, and there's a few things about it that make it very unobtrusive. The lens is very small on it. The camera is very small. Also, you can, mess around with it a little bit. You can flick about with the sort of wind-on lever, the advancing film lever, and you can. It's quite easy to sort of not throw it about, but kind of mess about with it a little bit. And there's a few sort of feints I use. I look at the top of the camera especially if I'm using a digital M, I always look at the top of the camera after I've taken a picture, as opposed to looking at the back of the camera. And if you look at the top of the camera and you pull a sort of slightly confused face, it means that you aren't sure whether you did take a picture or not, or at least this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And even if you did take a picture, it probably wasn't very good, because you're looking at the dials on the top of the camera with a sort of like a confusion. Whereas a lot of people will take a picture and then immediately go back to the screen on the back to see if they got it.
Got you.
And this is known as chimping. And as soon as you start chimping at a picture, it means yes, you definitely took a picture and you're making sure it was good. And people are aware of that. So I never do that. And the other great thing about the M is you can carry it in certain ways. You can put it, I often face the camera in towards my body. I never have the lens facing out. And I sling it over my shoulder so the lens is facing into my body. And in doing that, it means that it never falls off your shoulder, because the weight is leaning into your body. Yeah. And you never get your lens smacked, which if you put it the other way around on your shoulder, and I have done, because I've done every single mistake in photography, you can hit your lens, and you don't want to hit your lens, especially not your nice Leica lens.
Leica lens, yeah.
So it's very easily transportable, and it's one of those things that it doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like you're putting a sort of ball and chain around your neck. Yeah. It feels reasonably simple to bring with you.
Yeah, you sort of touched a little bit earlier, but speaking about your camera, what was your sort of first interaction with Leica, and when did you sort of decide that this was the camera brand for you?
Oh, my first interaction with Leica was with Leonard Freed, watching him work with Leica M6 and being on this workshop with him, and seeing how close he could get to people. At this stage he was a little old man, wearing a sort of a raver's hat, and he would just walk up to old ladies who were having a chat, and he'd stand next to them and he'd photograph them with film. And his contact sheets, as I recall, were amazing, because he would shoot about 6 frames of everything. So that was sort of his rule, is that he'd give it 6 frames and then move on, unless obviously it was Martin Luther King, in which case he's taking lots of pictures. But so his contact sheets were extremely ordered. There's 36 pictures on a contact sheet, and so he'd have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. He'd have 6 different events, and he would just stand there and get closer and nudge in, very, very humble in the way he shot. And so I saw him using the M6. Then it transpires that Cartier-Bresson uses the Leica. What did Robert Frank use? Oh, he used a Leica. And all of these people were absolutely fantastic photographers. And so you better get with the program and at least get what they were using and try to be half as good. And not even.
You're there. I was interested by at the beginning I sort of talked about your approach, and one of the first chapter in your book is entitled "Think Lucky, Be Lucky," and that's your the book that we mentioned earlier. How do you think a positive attitude helps you to take a good photograph or good photographs?
I think it's really important to expect to see something good. I think if you get up in the morning and you get out the door and go, today's going to be a shit day, nothing's going to happen. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it won't happen. And so it's almost like tricking your brain to be excited about it. And so I would get up and, call me stupid, but I would get up and with a big smile on my face and think, today's going to be a good day. Today is definitely going to be a good day. I'm going to go out and I'm going to get something great. Yeah. And I would go out and I would use that energy and use that hope of getting something great. And 99.99999% of the time I would come back and I would still think I'd got something great because I had such a great day of, positivity and hoping for luck. And then I'd get the film back the next day and be like, oh, this is all terrible. Absolutely terrible. What a joker. But I think just having the attitude, that hopeful attitude that something good might happen is really important. You can't do that every day. And I'm not, using some sort of, toxic positivity to get by on. But, some days you do go out and you go, I'm tired, I'm hungover, I'm on patrol. I'm basically making sure that nothing is going to happen today, and I'm going to walk the streets and make sure that nothing happens. And 9 times out of 10, nothing happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's with anything. I think with any form of creativity, it's really helpful to think that you are going to get something, whether it's from a negative point of view or a positive point of view or a happy point of view or a sad point of view. You can definitely go out and positively photograph sad things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of in line with this, your photographs often have like a witty or humorous element to them. Do you think British culture or being British has influenced this?
I do think the English, the British,
Or English, yeah.
But even Scots, the Welsh, the Irish, they're all funny. They're really funny people, and it's something I slightly miss in living in the Netherlands now. I'm now living in the Netherlands, although the Dutch are quite funny.
Yeah.
But the English are funnier, and we have irony and sarcasm.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely part of the culture.
Yeah.
And it's something that I lean on. And also I do think when you really truly find your photographic voice, it does mirror very much you. And I remember I've had moments where I wanted to be, sort of Anton Daggeter or, Trent Park. But it's not me, it's fake. It's me trying to, wear their clothes. And the reality of who I am is that I'm I think I'm quite funny and reasonably lighthearted, and that does come through in my pictures. And although I do, I have an empathy, and some of the pictures are sad. Some of them are tragic comedies, but my general sort of point of view is a reasonably positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of in line with that, or maybe mimicking other people. What's a sort of predictable trope in street photography that you never want to see again?
Oh,
I'll put you on the spot, but then actually maybe that's
okay. Let's do this.
Problematic.
Well, definitely the photograph reflected in the puddle. The picture where someone puts the camera down next to a puddle and photographs whatever is being photographed reflecting in the puddle. The photograph, the person going through the doors, which is reflected through the doors, so the person looks like they're walking into themselves, that picture. The bubble picture, the shadow picture, the colourful shadow picture, so there's someone walking through something colourful with a shadow, that is really, really, really overdone. The juxtaposition of someone walking past a poster that is doing something to their head or to their nose or to their eye or to their whatever. Some sort of animal which is so close to someone's face that the eye matches up with their eye. That one I've seen 100 million times. I think what needs to be done in street photography is people need to start feeling what other people are feeling more. Look at the gestures, look at the moments, the tender moments. Look at how the mother holds her child's hand, or someone helps the old sort of grandpa up the stairs. Those more emotional moments. And I think a lot of street photography has lent back too much on these things, these sort of tropes that are reasonably easy to achieve. And they're kind of not, whether they're supposed to be funny, they're not funny anymore, because it's like, being told the knock knock, who's there, Doctor Who joke, they're not funny anymore, or they're not clever anymore. They have been done. Yeah. And to just keep on being shown a repeated joke, especially photographically, is boring. Yeah. So yeah, I think I would like it to move more in a sort of emotional way, more of a poetic way. Look at Robert Frank. I mean, trailblazer. And so I think that kind of work really stands out for me. But there's still people doing great work.
Of course, and I think that's also, of course, alongside having that opinion. That might even be a moment, I don't know, maybe not, but maybe you would capture yourself, or, see your peers or friends or whoever capturing, and it's not saying that shouldn't exist in that way. It's just more of a,
it's just you ask what do you want to see less of, but I think in the same breath it's absolutely fine to take them, see it, take it, put it in the bag. It's 2 points. It's not 10 points, and go, oh, it's a 2-pointer. But may as well pick it up. They all add up. Because if you start censoring yourself, and I think this is quite interesting, if you start censoring yourself as a photographer, especially a street photographer, if you start saying, oh, it's not good enough in the moment, you won't take it. And then you actually close yourself down from that moment, progressing and getting better and better and better and better. Back to the man with the headless man. I thought, oh, can I be bothered to follow him? And then I did, and then it got better. It got better twice-fold. There was the mannequins and then the shadow in the light. So it's really important as a photographer, and this is back to hopeful, and this is back to positivity, is to say yes and go for it and see whether it's going to manifest and sort of get better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just sort of talking about evolution, what's your approach to still feel like you're evolving within your craft, despite being illustrious in what you do? Is that, how do you prevent becoming too repetitive?
Well, at the moment, I'm quite into constraints. It's something I talk a lot about, and having a constraint, meaning, with street photography, what I used to do is just go out the door and hope, go out into the big wide world and hope. And that is fine, but it doesn't necessarily give you a reward very quickly. And so what I've started doing now is giving myself projects a little bit like sunrise on sunset. I have to do it in the morning and I have to do it on a certain place. And at the moment I'm doing a project in Amsterdam at the Vondel Park. Vondel was a famous writer. And I'm doing a project only in the Vondel Park. And it's related to a famous play that he wrote, which was called Lucifer. And so the name of the project is the first time I've actually spoken about it, and I have to be a little bit careful.
You heard it here first.
I have to be a little bit careful because what I tend to do is I get the dopamine reward of telling you about it, and then I don't actually go out and finish it.
We can cut it out.
No, it's absolutely fine. So the project is called Lucifer's Playground. And the connection to Vondel and Lucifer is that Lucifer wrote Vondel wrote the play Lucifer. And so calling it Lucifer's Playground is as a connection to the writer. But what is Lucifer's Playground? And this park is Lucifer's Playground. And in that, it's open 24/7. There's all sorts of things happen there. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There's drug dealers, there's people fooling around in bushes, there's, all sorts of the weird and the wonderful, but there's also the fantastic. And I mean, it's all great. It's human life living 24/7 in this space. And who is Lucifer? And what I like is there's a connection between the camera, me, and my playground. Maybe I'm Lucifer. I'm the little devil that goes out and photographs all this stuff. And so within sort of finding these constraints and this little, slightly strange story that I can adhere to, I can go out and make pictures that stick to that theme.
Yeah. I think before we sort of end the podcast and talking, I have a few recurring questions that we will ask everyone. So I'm going to ask you them and see your response. So from today onwards, you can only shoot with one aperture. What would it be?
One aperture. That's a really good. Well, I can probably tell you. It'd probably be like f4. Mainly because the weather in the Netherlands half the time is f4 1,000th of a second, and I wouldn't want to not photograph in the winter. So shooting at f4 in the summer, slightly strange, but I could deal with it.
Love it. If your camera could talk, what would it say about you?
It would say, I can smell your breath on the back of me. You should brush your teeth better.
Oh God, that's amazing. Which photograph of yours changed the way you see photography?
Oh, that's a really good question. Probably one of the first pictures I took, the man looking at the wheel. It's very simple juxtaposition between a man carrying a wheel on his back and the Millennium Wheel. But I remember, all of those lessons that we've been speaking about, trying to stay calm in the moment. I'd just come back from Leonard Fried's workshop, and I took 19 frames on black and white film of this man looking at the wheel from behind. So, it wasn't scary or anything. I was behind him, but I knew it was a good picture. And I knew I had to do a few things, get the man's head in the right place and focus and the exposure. And I took however many it was, 17 or so frames, and I only got one that was sharp and one that was exposed right and one that was absolutely, in my eyes, perfect.
Yeah.
And that took 17. So, and it took, 25 seconds of manically, flicking through this film and just knowing that I had to throw as many pictures at this as possible in order to get it. And 1 in 17 was good. And so, there's a lesson there in that, don't think you've got it. Never think you've got it with 1. Never think you've got it with 2. Throw the kitchen sink at it.
I love it. If you could go back to the first time you picked up a camera, what would you tell yourself?
I would say, be careful, because you could be in this for the rest of your life. And but I would, what would I tell myself? I would probably I would say, in the future, only buy a 28, a 35 or a 50. Don't bother flirting with all those other lenses. It's a waste of time. You're going to waste some money on them. And I would definitely, I'm not a walking Leica advert. I would definitely have bought a Leica at the beginning, like just gone, right, I'm buying that and having that for the rest of my life, because value equals happiness.
Yeah.
And so the value that I get from using that camera has made me happy consistently.
Yeah.
Whereas the value I've had from other cameras has not made me happy consistently.
Naming no names.
Naming no names. But no, so generally, I think that's good enough.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Just one final question before we sort of wrap, I guess. Do you have a sort of young or emerging photographer on your radar that you think deserves more attention?
I can name lots, but Adlai Shell, who's a wonderful young man photographing out of LA, who's brilliant and really an inspiration to me. Billy Din, he works in New York, young guy, phenomenal talent, really impressive. My friend Eleanor Simon, who lives in Paris, and she's one of those really annoying people that doesn't actually photograph that much, but when she photographs, she just gets so many good shots, and it's like obscene. I almost wish she would work more. And like the people I run into, the Curtis Peacocks of this world, who were doing it from the age of 14, and he's still doing it now. And I don't know how old he is now. He must be in his 20s, but he's stuck with it. And to be that kind of into it from such a young age, I always find super inspiring. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, thank you for being here. It's been so interesting talking to you.
It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. I could carry on forever. Really good. Thank you.